I would like to greet each and every one of you, and I would like to say thank you very much for taking your precious time to watch this video. And I would like to thank those who wished me success and those who criticize me as well, because it's not the case whereby whenever people would criticize you, it means they don't love you or they hate you or they don't wish you success. Sometimes criticisms can be important to build yourself. Thank you very much. And again, if you are interested in my videos, please hit that subscribe button, that like button, so that the YouTube algorithm doesn't forget you. In this video, I just want to talk about the incident that took place in Vanderbijlpark. And there's a lot that I would like to talk about.
Seventeen-year-old Thato Mcikha and a 16-year-old classmate Sagwadi Mate died on Wednesday after days in intensive care. Both were matric pupils at water school Vanderbijlpark.
Ke hopola maobane re modimo re kopa mohlolo wa hao, re kopa hore Thato a kgutle, but unfortunately 3:30 re thola molaetsa hore Thato ha sa le teng, re le family re bohloko. And then ha ke tsebe hore ke reng ho motho a neng a kganna koloi eo, hore a awe ka bohloko ba hore botlisitseng bona, hore o awe ka motswadi a mo sisitseng ngwana. Hopola hore Thato o na a itse grade 12.
For Sagwadi's family, it's a bitter loss as she would have turned 17 on the 27th of January.
Initially, at face value, the charges were culpable homicide. But when the NPA perused the docket and studied the evidence that is in the docket, we found that we have prima facie evidence to prefer murder charges against the accused. Hence, he is now facing 14 counts of murder, 3 counts of...
Rest in peace to those who were involved in the crash and who passed away, and condolences to the parents or everyone, the guardians, and everyone who is related to those children and all those who died in that particular accident. This took place in Vanderbijlpark, Gauteng, South Africa. I always talk about history. We talk about slavery. We talk about where we're coming from, the conditions. We talk about corruption in South Africa, in Africa, and even in the world. We talk about the transatlantic slave trade. We talk about a lot of things in this channel. But it is important, again, to do a self-introspection. In other words, to hold ourselves accountable. Because if no one is holding us accountable, then who would? Because we have to take the matters into our hands. And if we are wrong as a people, in other words, we have to admit that we are wrong. So that is why in this video, I just want to talk about professionalism. Because as a people, especially here in South Africa, black people to be exact, when it comes to professionalism, we want to be pushed. We want to be reminded about professionalism. In other words, out of 10, I can give us 4. In other words, I can give us a rate of 4 out of 10 as a people, based on what we see in various businesses here in South Africa. In other words, I'm talking about the businesses that are administered by black people. Sometimes we want to be pushed. We want someone to tell us that we need to be professional. We want to be reminded. I say this because First of all, there's an allegation that the driver didn't have a driver's license, or probably his driver's license had expired. And that's a problem. That is why in my previous video, I spoke about corruption, the dangers of corruption, that the more we become corrupt and the more we allow this disease of corruption, the more we enjoy it, then the upcoming generation is in danger. So that is why right now many people are taking advantage of the government of South Africa, the laws of South Africa, because everything right now is weak. We can talk about the laws, we can talk about monitoring, everything now is weak, because even those who supposed to be monitoring, who supposed to be ensuring that everything is in order, they take bribes. They are corrupt, many of them. So when I say 99%, I'm not exaggerating. 99.999% is corrupt when it comes to these officials. So in other words, if now you are aware that these people or these officials are corrupt, what are you going to do? Most definitely, you are going to take advantage of the situation. For an example, let's say you are young, maybe you are 10 years old, and at home your father and your mother, they are always fighting, they are always drinking, they always do as they please, and there's no order. What will you do as a 10-year-old? You are going to take advantage of the situation. You will behave like them. You'll go out there in the streets and do whatever you want. How can we have people who drive on public roads without driver's licenses? It's because they are taking advantage of the situation. That is why, as a people, we need to mind professionalism. We need to respect professionalism. We need to love ourselves. Because anything can happen. You have to understand that anything can happen. So the moment you start your car, anything can happen on the road. So you have to be ready for anything. So that is why we have the laws that are governing all of us. We have the laws that are governing our cities, that are governing our towns. We can talk about speed limits. We can talk about all these things. But many of us, because we have a background of being unprofessional and we enjoy being unprofessional, this is what happens. Sometimes we have to do a self-introspection. We have to check ourselves. We have to be honest to ourselves. And we have to hold one another accountable, because nobody will. Nobody will. Yes, we talk about what we went through, but we should not allow those things to determine our future, to determine our lifestyle right now. So that is why I always say we have to be careful about our past. So we should not use all these manipulations, all these colonial mindsets to allow those things to become part of our culture. We have to go back to respecting one another. In other words, when you drive these kids, you have to act as if these are your kids. In other words, you have to think about your kids as well. In other words, if that moment comes whereby you feel like driving like Michael Schumacher, driving like Lewis Hamilton, then in other words, in your mind, you have to remind yourself that you have kids. You have to remind yourself that the kids that you are transporting, they have parents as well. You have to think about all road users. But because now we have this thing of like, I'm in charge, I'm in control, I'm taking advantage of the situation, most of the people don't care. Probably this man was driving on behalf of someone or was hired by somebody who is the taxi owner or the owner of that particular business. How can you give your take? Yes, I don't have, we don't have a full story, but how can you give your vehicle to someone who doesn't have a license? Because anything can happen anytime. So that is why the moment you start your car, you have to make sure that you are insured. In other words, there are things that you have to do in advance before you can just drive. You have to think that anything can happen. I believe that this is the time for us to grow up as a people. Let's love one another. Let's love one another. Let's make sure that even the education that we consume or the education that we apply to our children is the right one, is the correct one. Because right now there are many people who are saying if that taxi was driven maybe by a white person and etc., such thing would not have happened. And for me to respond to such statements, I have to be loyal to myself. It can happen to even to other groups of people. But this may not be far from the truth again. We have to be honest to ourselves. It can happen to everyone. But we have to be honest to ourselves to say, in our communities, in our society, there is this problem of being reckless. And without shifting a blame, we adopted this thing from colonialism, because prior to colonialism and all, we were not like this. Right now we are living in those times whereby we don't care. We are like, we don't care. We want to fight against the system, but we still live according to the system. So I believe that there's a lot that we need to learn as a people. In other words, black people to be exact, because the level of unprofessionalism is on another level, is very high. I'm talking about unprofessionalism. Unprofessionalism is very high amongst us here in South Africa. You can't do this. You can't do this. In other words, in order for us to fix this, we have to start from the scratch. We have to start from the scratch. In other words, we have to raise future police officers who won't take a bribe, who will do whatever it takes to respect the law. And we have to raise future drivers who will respect the rules or the regulations or the laws of South African public roads. So these are the people we need. We need to raise like nurses, future freedom fighters who are not fighting for their stomachs, but who are fighting for justice. In other words, we have to raise future business people who won't take advantage of others. In other words, we have to change our mindset. We have to change how we do things. In other words, this is like taking accountability. We cannot be right all the time, because other people might say, no, we are right. When we are wrong, we have to admit our wrong, to say, when it comes to this, right now, we are wrong. In my previous video, I spoke about corruption In other words, we have to take accountability to say we are corrupt. It's easy for us to be bribed. It's easy for us to be involved in corruption. What might be the cause? It's easy for us to become reckless. What is the cause? Sometimes the root of the problem is that we don't love one another. We don't love ourselves. We don't love ourselves. So professionalism, in other words, maybe in your own home, you can be reckless, you can do whatever. But the moment you start engaging with other people in public, right now you have to respect other people. You have to respect the rules. Can be the rules of the road, or maybe public rules in general. Just honor everything, because you are not living by yourself. You have to respect other people. So we need to respect one another as a people, because I believe that the foundation of professionalism is respect, is accountability, taking accountability. In other words, doing self-introspection to say, you know what, let me check myself, because I don't want to contribute in this chaos. These are the things that we need to deal with as a people. Let's just grow. Let's just grow up and understand who we are and understand the things that we need to do, because we cannot continue living like this. My final words would be, everyone who was involved in this crash and passed away, unfortunately so, should rest in peace. As a people, Black people, we need to wake up. Let's love one another. Let's respect one another. Let's prioritize professionalism all the time.